argue about when we're going to go to heaven and when Christ is going to come back. This thing called millennialism. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this morning. It's a really deep subject, and we'd need months and months and several sermons and several studies to go through all the thoughts. But let me see if I can give you a picture of what that means. You've probably heard the term the millennium. What that refers to is 6 times where it's mentioned in one book of the Bible, Revelation chapter 20, verses 2 through 6. We get the word millennium from the Latin word mil, which means 1,000, and annum, which means year, millennium. And that's where we get the 1,000. It refers to a 1,000-year reign of Christ. And it is only mentioned in one place in the Bible, Revelation 20. Yet, for years, biblical scholars have come up with several different versions of what they believe that millennium is, and when is Jesus going to come back, and when are we going to get to experience heaven. And there's 3 particular views that are all biblical. They have biblical background. There's nothing unbiblical about any of these views, but they're kind of a preference that we have. And I'll tell you what they mean. The first is the post-millennium view. If you can put this chart up on the big screens for me so everybody can follow along, you can see it a little bit better. The post-millennium view basically believes that Christ reigns for a millennium after we reach paradise here on earth. This was done by many first-century followers of Christ, and a lot of Puritans have also taken to this view. They basically believe that everything will get better before Christ comes. And how do they view the book of Revelation? That Revelation is referring to the progress of the gospel throughout history. This was a predominant view throughout a lot of the centuries up until 1900s. A lot of people believed it. We had an industrial age in America. We had years and years of peace in Europe. And then World War I happened. And then the Great Depression happened. And then World War II happened, and it was worse than World War I. And things didn't really seem to be getting better here on earth. You might profess to that now. Do you think things are getting better here on earth for Christ to come back? But post-millennials, some of them believe it. One particular scholar is J. Adams, who does hold to this view biblically that the gospel is to be spread, and as part of our mandate to share the gospel, and because of that, things will get better here on earth, and when they're good enough, then Jesus will come back and reign again. That's the post-millennial view in a nutshell, not drawn out a whole lot. Then you've got the pre-millennial view. This view holds that Christ will come back before his reign of the millennium on earth that's mentioned in Revelation. And there are actually 2 groups of pre-millennials. Most evangelical Christians, most Southern Baptists believe in the pre-millennial view, but they fall into these 2 groups. And I'm not going to get into what the difference is. One's called the historical premillennial view, and the other is called the dispensational premillennial view. Basically, those are theological terms, and they have to do a lot with the role of the church in that time, and the role of the rapture in that time, and the role of Israel in the kingdom at that time. Most premillennialists take on a literal interpretation of the chronology in Revelation. So chapter 12 happens and there's a big battle. Chapter 19 happens. Chapter 20 happens. Chapter 21 happens. And those are chronological events that happen in sequence. Most premillennialists believe that. And they basically believe that everything gets worse for the church before Christ will come back, since the name pre-millennial. Most of you, if you have a view this morning, are probably saying, I agree with the pre-millennial view, or I've been taught the pre-millennial view. But most of you, I would dare say, probably don't believe it because you read it in the Bible. It's because you read this book, Left Behind by Tim LaHaye, or part of this series, or you watched the video series with Kirk Cameron, or you watched the remake with Nicolas Cage, or you watched the last one on PureFlix that was a few years ago. This is in pop culture. When I was growing up in the 70s, some of you may remember there was a book called The Late Great Planet Earth that brought a lot of people over to the premillennial view. They thought that was the view that they wanted to take. Also, there was a movie series way back when. You can look at it on YouTube. It's called Left Behind. It was a really scary movie for Christians where people were all raptured, and this few people that were left were really just had a really rough time here on earth. And they sang a song that is in your There's no time to change your mind. The sun has come and you've been left behind. And it just goes over and over. They play it over and over in the movie. Watch it on YouTube. It's pretty scary and very 70s kitsch for Christians. But it convinced a lot of people that the premillennial view, biblical as it is, yes, they do believe in the Bible. Yes, they do believe the book of Revelation, that this is the main view. There are biblical scholars that you've heard of. John Piper is a premillennial. Al Mohler is a premillennial. David Jeremiah is a premillennial. Skip Heitzig is a premillennial. And some guy named Pastor Clay is a premillennial. Okay? So we have premillennialism, which is a biblical view, and most people believe that Christ is going to come back before his reign. Then there is a third view, which is called the amillennial view. Whenever you put the word a in front of something in Latin or the other words, it means no millennium. So this name literally means no millennium, which was given to the amillennials by the premillennialists. Okay? It really doesn't mean that they don't believe in a millennium. A better term for it would be that they believe in a realized millennium. In other words, a realized millennium where Christ is currently reigning as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords in heaven with those saints who have already gone to be in heaven with him. And they believe that that is a figurative reign, not a literal 1,000-year reign. It's got a biblical comparison of apocalyptic literature in context. So you have to believe some of the book of Revelation is an apocalyptic literature book. In other words, it's not a literal book where this happened, this happened, this happened. For example, when you see Satan described in the book of Revelation, he's a big red dragon. Okay? Well, how many of us actually take that literally? Not many. We know that that's kind of a figurative example. That's what amillennialists say. Amillennialists also believe in a recapitulation of the events that are depicted in Revelation. For example, these verses here that premillennialists say, chapter 12 battle, chapter 19 battle, chapter 21 battle, and the reign of Christ in 21, amillennialists will take those same chapters and so say these are all not different events, they're the same battle. In fact, the word in Greek means the battle. And you're just looking at that battle from several different viewpoints. So that's what amillennials believe. And to put it in a nutshell, amillennialists believe that everything gets better with the gospel, but that the church is persecuted until Christ returns. So they believe in a realized millennial view. Now, there's not enough time to go into all the differences of those. All of them have advantages. Some of them have disadvantages in all three of the views. But this is something that's on our minds a lot. We talk about this. I mean, if I said we were going to talk about the end times, some of you would be kind of interested. Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's learn about that. Let's study the Word, and we would want to do that. But some Christians like to argue about it. And whether it's premillennial and amillennial. Now, some amillennialists that you may have heard of are Augustine, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Randall Floyd. So I've just given away my view. I'm an amillennialist. In fact, somebody in our church found out that I was an amillennialist, and they were a premillennialist, and they came, talked to me in the hallway, and this guy came and said, I just found out that you don't believe in a literal pre-mill kingdom of Christ. And I said, well, on most days, 9 out of 10 days, I lean towards the amillennial view. I believe that the premillennial view has some merits to it. Well, then this guy says, so when Jesus says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, what do you believe? And I said, that his will is being done in heaven right now. That's what I believe. And then this guy started to raise his voice. So when you read Scripture, the promises of God's kingdom are all over the Old Testament. Here's some texts I brought to read to you. 2 Samuel chapter 7, Psalm 2, Isaiah 2, Isaiah chapter 11, Isaiah chapter 30, Isaiah chapter 35. How about Isaiah 65, Jeremiah 31, Jeremiah 33, Ezekiel chapter 34, Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Joel chapter 3, Zephaniah chapter 3, and Zechariah chapter 14. What do you say to that? And I said, What about Matthew chapter 19, where it talks about the Son of Man sits on his throne in glory? What about Acts 3:19, where it's called the time of refreshing? What about 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 and chapter 2, where it describes the kingdom? Then this guy was getting really mad. He points his finger at me and he says, there are too many allusions to this in Isaiah chapter 60 and Ezekiel 40 through 48 and the rebuilding of the temple that is found in Revelation. And then I pointed my finger at him and I said, but Revelation 21 and 22 is talking about the new creation. So that's a problem for the pre-mill view. Now this guy's getting really red in the face and he's starting to shout louder. And he says, but those scriptures, you have a literal rebuilding of the temple of God. And then I was getting red in the face and a little bit defensive, and I'm saying, John says in Revelation 21 and 22, it's about the new creation. There is no new temple because you're in the presence of Christ and you don't need a temple. Then this guy's getting really angry and I'm getting a little defensive. And finally I just said, okay, Pastor Clay, calm down. Let's talk about this. And then Pastor Kyle came out in the hall to find out what all the shouting was about. And we said, we're talking about the end times. And I said, what's the problem? I said, well, Pastor Clay's pre-mill and I'm on-mill. And Pastor Kyle comes and says, you're both wrong. It's pro-millennial. Whatever God does, we're for. So that was kind of our conversation. That did not happen, by the way. But you can kind of see how we can get caught up in arguing and studying this. Now, I haven't solved this today for anybody. There are advantages and disadvantages to all three views. All three views can be defended biblically, and it's kind of your preference. Let me show you how that works. Everybody snap your fingers. Okay? Snapping, most of you are probably snapping with your middle finger and your thumb. Okay? Now try to do it with your index finger. Why can't I hear you anymore? Because you haven't worked on it like I have. Okay? I actually learned, I was a music major and I had to learn how to direct in college, and they needed to be able to see my hands to direct. So I learned to snap with my index finger instead of my middle. I can do it, but not very good, but I've worked at it. Okay? Put some effort, put some thought, and some practice into it. That's what we do. When we're looking at the end times, we put some effort, we put some thought, we open up the scripture, we do some exegetical study, we have discussions, we can get along with it. We ask for more enlightenment from God, and that idea of pro-millennial is correct. Whatever God does, we're all for, because Christ, we all agree, Christ comes back in the end and he reigns as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and he gives us a heaven and a place that he has prepared for each and every single one of us, and we all get to go and to enjoy that face to face with him. You at your best, with everybody else at their best, face to face with Christ in a relationship with him that lasts forever, eternally. That's what we do agree on about heaven.